Hi, my name is D. Chad Guthrie, and I'm doing a project on global learning for my master's in teaching. It's for Dr. Lee in the spring of the 2016 semester. We are talking about the concept of cosmopolitanism in education. And in a nutshell, cosmopolitanism is it draws from a universal theory of, traditionally it meant citizens of the world, but in this case, the modern cosmopolitanists have thought it to be a blending between valuing the local, but also looking at the universal. So whereas you can value your own local traditions and those of others, you still have to look at it in a universal context. So the obligations that they set forth are those towards all people, but at the very minimum, you still have an obligation to yourself and the people around you. So in that context, it sort of fosters um, it fosters hopefully a sense of community, a sense of willingness to discuss and just to discuss and talk about things. It encourages just cross-cultural experiences. And as part of that, we're learning how to bleed that over into curricula and the educational experience. So as part of that, I was asked to interview someone that I would view as a cosmopolitan person. And in that vein, I would like to introduce Jagoda Perich Anderson. She's an accomplished facilitator and a mediator. Currently, she's working with Boeing. She develops and delivers leadership training programs now, mainly to people from China that have connections with U.S. businesses and just cultural in general, the U.S. cultural in general. She's also the author of The Conflict Tango. It's a blog, and the author of Conflict to Creativity. And they both seek how to show people how conflict, if you handle it well, if you handle it skillfully, it can empower you to bring out creative and innovative elements. In that vein, I'm going to introduce Miss Perich Anderson, and I want to welcome you. Hi.
Hi, thanks, Chad. Thanks for thinking of me for this.
Sure. It was a easy choice for me. Um, just as part of this, I wanted to ask you some questions about cosmopolitanism as you've understood it and as I've basically explained it, and just see how you feel you may fit within that philosophy,
Okay,
personally and professionally. So, just to start out with, could you tell me a little bit about your history, about your background?
sure. So, as you know, Chad, I was born in what was the former Yugoslavia in what is now Zagreb, Croatia. I lived in four countries by the time I was 10 years old. So, the former Yugoslavia, Italy, Germany, and then the US. I really consider myself an American at this point, really grew up and assimilated into American culture. However, an intrepid traveler, love to travel and love to get to know people from around the world.
Uh, just on a more humorous note, what food is your favorite?
What food is my favorite?
Yeah.
Currently, currently I can't decide whether it's um, Thai food or Mediterranean food.
Oh, you've
Those are
gone the fusion route, the cosmopolitan route, right?
maybe, yeah. I eat a lot of Chinese nowadays too, though. So
Oh. So, in that sense, I guess you view yourself as a cosmopolitan, as
I
we've
do,
defined it?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Um, how do you, I mean, given the diversity of your background and your history, how do you feel like you fit within the parameters of cosmopolitanism and the traditions of cosmopolitanism?
Well, as I understand it from the little overviews that you sent me in preparation for this, I guess I would say that I think of myself, I said this, as an American. However, I feel that it's important to be connected to and understand the broader world
Hmm.
and to interact with people from other parts of the world as a way to both enrich myself, as a way to understand others, as a way to, really get a handle on what is happening in current times um, so that can make better decisions in terms of policies. I think we're fortunate to live in a country, a democracy in which we get to vote on how things go. So I think all of that is important. Plus, I just think it's very enriching and it's really enjoyable to me to learn about people from other cultures, travel to other places, try different foods,
Yeah.
Just so I just came back from China. I should just mention this and attended a banquet, a business banquet, at which they served pig's head. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so it's on one of those lazy Susan big tables like they have in Chinese restaurants, even in the States. And you use your chopsticks and you take little bits of meat out from the pig's
Hmm.
head. So that was an adventurous banquet to say the least.
I guess the point would be is whether you eat it or not.
Yeah, I have to try it, so I'm willing to try most things at least once.
Yeah. Well, that would truly be an adventure. I'm not sure how I would have reacted to that myself.
Yes, it was a little shocking, I will say.
Well, one part of it is that one strand of cosmopolitanism that we have understood that we've studied in our class, and that's a more modern view of cosmopolitanism is this recognition of a universal approach, but also a recognition that everyone comes from somewhere, and that local traditions and local cultures are as important, and yours, an individual's culture is as important as the next person's. And in that regard, I mean, you lived in a lot of places. You've traveled many places in the world. I mean, you've worked many places in the world. Do you feel like you have a local culture, a sort of a grounding culture?
Yeah, I do. I guess I think of it in concentric circles.
Hmm.
So there's the family culture, there's the family values that I grew up with, and those are imbued with both I guess I'll say the uh, values that I have from Yugoslavia, from my dad, from the family kinds of values that we have, which are really about loyalty and hanging together and those kinds of
Hmm.
things. I think I have, I live in a neighborhood. I have friends in the neighborhood. And so, I really see myself as a member of this
Hmm.
community. We do things together. We have community events throughout the year, and, we gather, we
Hmm.
go to each other's homes. Those kinds of things are really nice. I think of myself as a West Coaster. I live in Seattle, Washington. I've lived in California. There are elements of the West Coast in the United States that really have to do with, letting people be adventurous and
Hmm.
independent and creative. And, it's like I really resonate with those kinds of things. So
Right.
I also, as I said, I think of myself as American and, the values of democracy and what it means to live in a democratic country are important to me. So, I think of it in sort of those kinds of concentric circles. And I was actually in preparing for this, thinking about this, I thought, one of the things that I believe, this you can hear my conflict background coming into play here, but one of the things I believe is that when certain conflicts happen at a mass scale, like we're seeing in the Middle East, for example, part of, certainly not the entire part, but a piece of what's happening is people feeling the need to protect their
Hmm.
values and their culture. And, it turns violent, obviously, in the case of wars. And secondarily, there's also a sense that people um, need to and retrench. So as a part of protecting themselves, they can't let anybody else in. So there's another side of that where some people in some groupings don't want to let anybody else in. They believe their truth is the truth. There's only one right way to be and believe and live.
Hmm.
And so they close themselves off. They become closed systems, right? So I think there are those two extremes that we're seeing in a lot of places in the world right now, neither of which I find useful
Right.
in terms of creating a safe, warm, interesting place to live. It's not that those are not the places I would want to live. So therefore, I think it's important to accept people's differences and not to dismiss them, deny them, try to make them go away. I don't believe in converging and making everybody be the same. But neither do I necessarily think that, well, just because somebody believes something I don't, that they're more right than I am. I don't have to give into that. It's important for me to hold on to, what's my true north? What are my values? What are the groups I belong to that I want to continue to adhere to because it's part of who I am?
It's a couple different interesting subjects you brought up. Is one is with the whole concept of those concentric circles. In a way, to flesh that out, is it that those those circles have sort of expanded over your life, or have you just gone from circle to circle from Yugoslavia, and then like adding
Hmm.
Germany and then adding the United States, and I mean, is it sort of an expanding circle, or are they a little bit more compartmentalized? If you know what
Yeah,
I'm
I
getting
think
at.
I do. That's an interesting question. Well, I guess I would say when I was a child, you kind of have this really, focused in view, right? So I suppose it would be that the circles expanded as I
Okay.
both moved and matured a little bit in my understanding of things. And it probably isn't until I became an adult I
Hmm.
started really, seeing things retrospectively and with more education behind me that I could actually put words to it or, that kind of thing. So I guess I would see them more as concentric and or overlapping, like a Venn
Ah,
diagram,
yeah.
rather than separated out. It's like I don't think I've rejected any of those past
Hmm.
cultures or places that I've been out of hand. It's like, well, that was in the past. I'm done with that. I can set it to aside. It's not like that.
Yeah, I think it's probably an interesting perspective because many Americans, they come from their hometown and then they build upon that, and it's more of a foundational structure. Like myself, where I grew up in a very small town, but then as I've grown up, it's changed quite a bit. I've become a different person in some ways, but still remained the same. So I think there's a bit of a dichotomy. But I think what you're talking about is more of a fluid process, where you.
Yeah, it may be, Chad, because I've had to adapt along the way. So,
Mhm.
from, moving from country to country first, you have to learn the rules and ways of being in a completely different culture, had to learn new languages, had to figure out how to fit in and adapt to, my new surroundings and the people that were around me. So I think I've learned to be really adaptive in that way. And so it probably is a little more fluid.
Hmm. Great. There was another part of your statement there about, about you alluded somewhat to conflict and how there can be walls and barriers put up. One of the concepts of this brand of cosmopolitanism that we're talking about deals with local customs. It deals with local beliefs, but it has also a universal thread in that they're universal traits, they're universal morals or values. Like the difference between um, how a marriage will be or how family is structured or even what is considered criminal. But at the same point, they think that there are universal values such as kindness, such as cruelty. Would you ascribe to that same view that even though all the places you have been and lived, that even though there's a lot of difference in how they structure their lives and their society, that there are still those universal beliefs?
Yes, absolutely. And so I can actually give you the example of, working with the Chinese for the last several years.
Hmm.
And I've been over, just came back from China, in fact. I've been over there. And so, we could just take family, for instance. Family is very important to the Chinese. The Chinese, for political reasons, well, for economic and social reasons, have had a rule that couples could only have one child. It's the one child policy in China. That was considered, based on conversations I've had with people from China living in mainland China, that was considered a hardship. It was very difficult. It was their way of controlling the population.
Hmm.
That rule has just this in the last year begun to be loosened up.
Hmm.
So there are now people can start having, a second child and so on. So, which many people feel good about. So family is, I would say, a universal value, and the way they raise children. I talk to people who have small children, and what do they do on a weekend? How do they spend time together? Or I might go for a walk in a park in China, and you see families together. Moms, dads, little kids. Having a good time in a park, playing games, going for walks, whatever it happens to be. You see the same thing over here in the U.S., right?
Hmm.
So some of those things, we have in common. Now, what are the kinds of rules that they raise children with? Those might be culturally specific.
Hmm.
You know, um, is it how you eat with chopsticks? You don't eat with a knife and fork. You don't pick your teeth in public or at the table. You don't. There are different things like that that are more important over there that might not be as important here, or they might be different, completely different. So
Great. No, thanks. I appreciate the input there. That was a wonderful answer. I think the last topic that I'd like to discuss with you is on more on the professional level. You've obviously had a lot of experience with different people, different cultures, different countries. How do you think the whole concept of cosmopolitanism could how does it apply to what you do? I mean, is it now having learned a little bit more about it? I mean, could it be almost like a central concept to how you work, or is it just would it be um, a portion of how, I mean, how you would view your work? Just could you how would you view cosmopolitanism in the professional world?
I guess I think maybe you lost my video feed. Let me
I
just
did.
work on.
There
Can
we
you
go.
see me?
I
Okay.
can.
I guess in the first place, I would say it drew me to the kind of work I do, right? So in the first place, it, I wanted to have the opportunity to work with people from other cultures um, in other parts of the world. So it, I guess, created an openness in me. And then I guess the other part of that is the way I approach it when I work with the Chinese. I've also, by the way, worked in Argentina and Mexico. Um, and so it, the way I interact with people, the way I engage with them probably makes a difference in that way, right? So I approach it with a sense of curiosity. I want to know about them. I want to try and understand them. I have not just professional conversations, but during those open, more social times, I'm willing to engage them about their personal lives, like, my story about finding out about the young parents in China. So it it enables me, I believe, to create bridges and connections with people who might be very different from me in other respects. It also, I will say, creates challenges.
Oh,
So I have to, so communications can be challenging. The worldview in China is really very different than the American worldview, and it's you can see it in the language, the way that language. Mandarin is very, very different from a romance-based language or an English-based language like we have. So, and it means that people think differently. They think their paradigms, their worldviews. They think fundamentally differently, and it's reflected in their language. So even when words get translated so that we can, have a conversation, I have to really work to try and understand the context in which somebody is saying something, and they have to do the same for it to really work. And we've had some, I've had some really interesting sort of failures of communication that, it's taken time to repair
yeah.
because of that.
I guess also your past, your personal past, along with your professional occupation today. I mean, it must build on each other. Where having that background that sort of mirrors your professionalism must help in that regard. Where if you have that language difference, I mean, you can get senses of humor out of it. You can
Yeah.
pull other things out of it than just the pure business. Trying to get things done, the corporate way of looking at things. Do you think that's true?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, well, because I think I have sort of a sense of what it's like to be a foreign person.
Ah,
So the Chinese come here to the States, which they often do when I work with them. I mostly work with them here in Seattle. When they come here, I understand a little bit about what it must be like for them to be a foreign person who doesn't speak English maybe all that well or at all, here. Or if I go to China, it's the same, it's the same. I kind of consent, I have I guess you would say, experience with that. So I have some empathy for that. So again, I would approach that perhaps a little differently than just being, completely task oriented, trying to get a job done.
right. Well, I think that concludes it for me. I mean, have got all my questions out there and wonderful answers, and it's a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you very much for it. I think this has been fantastic, actually. So I think we've even learned a good bit more about each other. So I
I
know,
think so, Jen. This
which
is
is,
great. Thank you.
yep, that's the whole reason about cosmopolitanism is communication and bridging those gaps. So I'd like to thank you again, and I will let you know how this turns out.
I love it. And I'd love a copy of this video. And I'd love to hear what kinds of conversations you end up having in classes.